Alrighty, so today's work is on descriptive writing, and particular descriptive paragraphs. So as promised, I'm going to go through what an example of the writing assignment for today would look like. So I've written this example paragraph. I'm just going to go through it, read it with you, and then talk a little bit about it. And then as soon as I'm done that, I will do the exact same thing. I will actually demonstrate how I would go about, first doing the planning, the visualization and planning, and then actually writing a paragraph. So let's kick right into it. So I've written this example paragraph about one of Nanaimo's beautiful natural parks. It's a city park called Linley Valley, or Caudle Lake in Linley Valley, and I call that little area the Emerald Hills. So let's read through it. Behind Caudle Lake, up the steep cliffs of brown-red soil, there lies the Emerald Hills. These bluffs are covered in dense, spongy coats of rich green moss, 2 feet thick if it's an inch. The glimmering hills are surrounded by towering fir and arbutus trees with their glowing verdant needles and strawberry red bark. So if you remember, the first step of a descriptive paragraph is to have a clear topic sentence. If we look at that first sentence, it clearly explains what I'm going to do. I'm going to describe these Emerald Hills. It even has a little bit of description. It's talking about a lake being there, and then you can see going up these steep cliffs, and then you come to the main purpose, which is going to be describing these Emerald Hills. And then you can see, as I mentioned in my kind of layout, I start to move through the sentences. So initially I'm talking about what I see. So let's carry on there from this point. Through the twisted branches, I can see the small birds hopping with their white speckled red sides and dark black backs. So again, it's visual. I'm describing what I'm seeing. I climb here on my weekly hikes to stand atop a knoll of lichen-covered rocks. So again, you can kind of picture this. You can picture the writer hiking through these trees, seeing the birds, and standing on top of a rock. These lumps of rock jut up from the mossy slopes like the broken ancient knuckles of some sleeping giant whose hands are resting just above the surface of his sleeping cave. Okay, so this is the first one of those comparisons that I talked about in my last video. Because we can see that this particular example uses like, we know that it's going to be a simile. I'm comparing the rocks to the knuckles of a sleeping giant. So I'm not saying the rocks are knuckles of a sleeping giant. That would be a metaphor. That would be a direct comparison. When you use like or as, it's called an indirect comparison, which is a simile. So it's visual. It's also supposed to engage the imagination of the reader. Holding on to a forgotten memory, he sleeps through eternity. From the stony knuckles, I can look down at Nanaimo's harbor. So that there, from the stony knuckles, that is actually a metaphor. So I've shifted from doing a simile comparison to now I've jumped straight into type of a metaphoric comparison, because I don't say that the stones look like knuckles. I call them actual stony knuckles. So that's a very interesting point. You can kind of see the difference between a simile and a metaphor right there in those two sentences. Where was I here? From the stony knuckles, I can look down at Nanaimo's downtown, past the fair forests of our island city, to a few stubborn towers that hold the wild at bay. How I wish they would crumble and fall into dust, or that I could jump into a time machine and spin back before the wild was polluted by our hungry ambitions. So now I'm starting to get into the feeling of the writer, talking about what the writer is thinking about as he sees this scene, looking from the forest down towards the city. So what you'll notice here is that you might correctly say that I've forgotten some of the steps that I laid out in my video, right? Which is a good thing to be aware of. I haven't talked about sounds yet. I haven't talked about any sort of smells that might be attached to this location that I'm at, the setting that I'm at. So let's see what's next here. Maybe I'll incorporate some of those things. I like to stand at the top of the Emerald Hills on rainy days when the sky is gray. Okay, here we go. I smell the rain and the wind then. Fresh and pure are the kisses of the sky. Okay, so here's another metaphor. Does the sky actually come down and kiss me? No, but I'm comparing the wind and rain to kisses, right? You can imagine this. that the writer is having this kind of interesting experience on his hike. I steam and sweat from the effort of my hike as heat rises off my plastered brow in smoking waves. So again, this is a very visual way to try to engage the audience. And I look back over the lake to the reaches of the forest behind, to the green legions of Earth's lungy soldiers. So what is this? What is this type of comparison here? So again, is it direct or is it indirect? Is it a simile or is it a metaphor? What do you guys think? If you said metaphor, you're correct because there's no like or as here as part of this comparison. I'm directly comparing the trees to being the Earth's soldiers, these Earth's lungy soldiers. Kind of an interesting phrasing there. Overhead, a lonely eagle circles, or a prompting raven croaks its throaty cry. So again, here we go. There's visual there. You can see the birds in the sky, but there's also some sound as well, the croak of the raven. Come back, come out, she cries, and hike the emerald hills, hills, hills. So that's a bit of a sum up, but it's done in kind of an artistic way. So it's a little bit interesting. And you can see I've done a little quick analysis of this for you. Does it fit within the word count? I said 250 to 400. It's just about 300 words, which is nice. 13 sentences. And if we look again, you'll see that there is actually fairly good use of some of our devices here. We've got, you can see there's quite a few scoopable phrases. There's PLMPs that are preloading some of the sentences. Let's see here. We could have more if we analyze it. There could be more examples of so here we go. This is an example of a compound sentence, right? I've got comma fanboys. And moving into clause 2 there. Let's see what else. Yes, look, here we go. Interesting. I've included a semicolon sentence here. So you can see I am using, oh, look here, the next sentence as well is a compound sentence, right? So it's got quite a few things going on here. It's a little bit dense and it's packed full of some interesting comparisons. It's got lots of adjectives. It follows kind of an order. It does touch on many of our senses. So I would say that this is a successful example of a descriptive paragraph.